Well, welcome everybody to our brand webinar right here at gethealthy.store. I'm Dr. Tracy. I am the Chief Health and Growth Officer here, and I'm so excited for this webinar tonight because it's about an incredibly revolutionary product by MYOS MD called Muscle Formula. The unique ingredient inside is Fortetropin, and we have our good friend, Dr. Chris Meletis, who is going to walk us through utilizing scientifically validated Fortetropin to sustain and regain muscle mass associated with aging and weight loss. No time better than now, as we see all these GLP-1 products hitting the market. And while I am for effort towards weight loss, I always want it to be safe and effective and sustaining. So let's start with a few Get Healthy updates. If you're familiar with what we do here, please register for our roundtable that happens bi-weekly. This is a great way for practitioners who are like-minded to come together. I usually lead these. I talk about protocols, products, and ingredients, specific formulas, specific conditions, and then we alternate that with business topics, marketing strategies, ways to do webinars, how to write a blog. So sometimes we have our marketing team in, and these are just great opportunities for you as practitioners to learn how to get out there and get attention to your incredible genius. Also, we have our new blog that's out. We have broken down affiliate links and why those lead customers away from your brand. That's what Get Healthy is all about, leading people back to you, the ambassador of health, because we know that you bring the value. So we appreciate you being here tonight and spending your time with us. I am going to step away from the mic and get started with our very special guest, Dr. Chris Meletis. Welcome, Dr. Chris. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Wonderful to be here. Great to speak to colleagues around the world. And I'm very passionate about this topic. In fact, it came near and dear to me because my wife is a vegetarian vegan, has dealt with her chronic health issues. And I was just sharing my children are 26 and 31. So anybody that's good with math can figure out, like, well, Chris and his wife probably are getting older. And the answer is yes. And I think this is going to be a fun topic. It's going to tie in the weight loss crazes of today, which of course are always a fad, and there's always a consequence to rapid weight loss, which we'll chat about. It's also going to talk about sarcopenia and the role of muscle health in so many aspects of things. So whether we're older, and actually I chose this picture because I did a podcast in New Zealand, and 56-year-old podcaster commented that her mom, for the hour we did the podcast, was actually on a stationary bicycle recovering from hip fracture and hip surgery. And prior to that, she had a stroke, and she snuck in 1 pound weights to the hospital to have her mom work out while in a hospital bed, not to lose any of her additional muscle mass. So that staying healthy and being fit is important. That concept, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it, is so real. And we see a good example of individuals that are able to do pull-ups that are older, and then we see people that can't barely walk that are older. So let's put the edge towards our patients. And also knowing that the myokines and exerkines made by our tissues are critical. We never thought, when I graduated in 1992, the muscles were endocrine organs. What? And so now we know a lot more about that, which we'll have some fun going over the scientific research on that as well. So whenever we lose rapid amounts of weight loss, whether it be bariatric surgery or the GLP-1, the semaglutide, Wegovy, or whatnot, these are all things that are going to disproportionately increase our muscle loss potential. And that's bad, because welcome to the world of yo-yo dieting. Because once we lose that active metabolic tissue, we're actually going to not be able to sustain that weight loss. And we work too hard to gain our muscle to actually lose our muscle. We're going to discuss Fortetropin today. It is a raw fertilized egg, never been exposed to heat. And even my wife, which is vegetarian vegan, which does eat products with eggs, says it's actually pretty good. And that's remarkable, because my wife will not eat an egg by itself. And so natural ways to lower myostatin is important. As we're getting older, all our myostatin levels, all things being equal, are rising, and elevated myostatin leads to sarcopenia and a lot of other things, which we'll chat about. We'll discuss anabolic resistance, which has very little to do with anabolic pathways in terms of steroids, but more that as we get aged muscles, they're not able to take up the protein as well. And then myokines as a fountain of youth within the body. So once again, I'm an independent educator for MYOS, and many of you know I've written 19 books, a couple hundred national articles. I just love whenever we can have food as your best medicine. This is a great approach, and this is a food, which is wonderful. Being a proud Greek as I am, I took the opportunity here to throw a fun little riddle to keep us all awake, as we've all had busy days as clinicians. And there are two sphinxes in ancient history. One is the Egyptian sphinx, and one is the Greek sphinx, which guarded the city of Thebes. And they had a riddle, and it says, which creature has one voice yet becomes four-footed, two-footed, and three-footed? If you don't know the answer is us. But our goal of the talk today is let's actually work on not becoming three-footed, and let's keep on being good ped and keep on moving forward. And so when we're getting older and the population is getting older, we're seeing this in our clinical practice a lot. It's like, okay, well, when I first graduated, I was 26 years old. Once again, you can do the math and figure out the age that I might be. And it's like, wow, everything was easy. I had no idea when I got together at family functions, like, oh, those people are sitting down. They're not doing very much because they felt tired and worn out. We do not need to accept our chronological age. We can embrace a younger biological age. And that's really what we do as functional medicine providers, is trying to instill that. But we need to give them the ability to break free from the entropy and gain some momentum. So we know that sarcopenia can have a myriad of problems and challenges. It leads and is contributed to by mitochondrial dysfunction, chronic conditions. With excess weight, not only do we have a hormonal dysfunction, but we also, once again, become often less mobile, which further feeds into loss of that active metabolic tissue. We also know with sarcopenia, there's a telomere attrition. We know you want to have just the right size of telomeres, not too long, not too short, kind of like Goldilocks, and neurodegeneration. And there's even a link between Alzheimer's that you'll see on a slide coming up, as well as sarcopenia, and as relative to inflammation and neuroinflammatory processes. So as you can see, we're losing muscle mass unless we're really fighting to maintain it. And we meet our patients where they're at in our clinical practice. So they come in and they've been on XYZ medications, which might have been poisoning their mitochondria. They might have had sleep apnea undiagnosed and undertreated, poison the mitochondria. If you think about it, we talk about food, we talk about water, but how often do we talk to our patients about, are you getting enough air? Are you actually breathing well during those 6 to 8 hours of restoration or rest at night? So very important. And when we look at that sarcopenia side of things in a graphic in the right-hand upper corner, really speaks volumes to like, wow, that is a young person's arm. And later on in their life, unless they're doing something about it, it's going to be it might be the same girth, but it's going to have less active metabolic function. So aging is our enemy, and we need to work with aging and not accept aging. Well, as my father-in-law says from Oklahoma, it's, well, I got old timers disease. He's playing a pun on Alzheimer's disease, but we really need to look at the physical inactivity, low-grade inflammation, and digestion. If we're not doing a very good job of digesting, we're not going to assimilate the protein. And then once we get to that weaker muscle state, an injury, a disuse issue, and or we have hyperchlorhydria or achlorhydria, we're not assimilating, and then the muscle at the muscle level, the myokine level, is not able to actually function as well. And we call that geriatric syndrome, and it's in medical literature. So that use it or lose it, well, we got to address that. And once again, we're often very sedentary, and I know I've been caught eating at my desk and while doing a webinar and getting my continuing medical education done. But then we have patients, well, they got injured. I actually ended with a rotator cuff issue. And so as a result, I stopped using my right dominant arm, and I started losing muscle mass and size and tone. And so this application of Fortetropin has that application, helps with the obese individual that's looking to get fit and that has some anabolic resistance and deconditioning, helps with the disuse syndrome, and it also helps with having been sick, hospitalized or not. And this ties into a conversation called euthyroid sick syndrome. So we probably know people in our lives, and definitely in our practices, where they went into the hospital, they just never have been quite right since. Well, the current research shows that 75% of people that are hospitalized suffer from euthyroid sick syndrome. And that doesn't mean it's a thyroid issue. It's the thyroid has gone into an ancient preservation mode, a quasi-hibernation mode. So imagine being in a cave and you can't get food and you have to let that limb heal or injury heal. Well, also deprivation of calories do that. And that's why we've seen our patients, they do really well on weight loss, and then they start gaining the weight or plateauing again. And that's because we start shutting down or riding the brake, so to speak, which is the reverse T3. So the most common presentation of euthyroid 6 syndrome is that the T3 and free T3 become lower, and there's a lower normal T4 and probably often lower normal TSH. So we were only looking at T4 and T3, like, oh yeah, or T4 and TSH. We're like, okay, those are normal numbers. It's a free T3 and of course also the reverse T3, so critical. So imagine the COVID era, imagine a flu, imagine a cold, imagine an injury, whatever led a person to either be hospitalized or bedridden for a while. This starts happening. And this is important because the thyroid actually communicates directly to the mitochondrial DNA, which allows for the browning of our fat tissue, which allows for thermogenesis. So we have T3, and then we got muscle function. So as you can see down here, we have the mitochondria and we have the T3 receptors for T3 thyroid. And this is why it's so critical for us to approach it from that functional medicine perspective, not be happy with just a TSH or a T4, but rather look at that deeper side of things. And so our Hashimoto's patients that aren't dialed in when they first come to our practice, we look at their free T3, we look at the reverse T3, we get them dialed in. So their fatigue, their muscle weakness, their stamina, all these things start improving, because now we're telling via the metronome, and the metronome, for those who are not musically inclined, is the tick-tock like on a top of a piano. Well, that's telling all of our cells, including our mitochondria, how much energy to produce. And as we get older, I was 30 years old, and I'm twice that now, but when I was 30 years old, I made about 60 kilograms of ATP per day. And so did you. And if you're 30, you're still making about 60 kilograms per day of ATP. Yes, you're hearing kilograms per day, 60, about 130 pounds. But we lose about 10% per decade. So I'm 30% less on my ATP on a good day. That's assuming I'm not doing a drug that is impacting my ATP production. And there's many of them, a whole nother talk that I give. It's like, wow. So we also have to realize that when we lose weight, we're mobilizing toxins, those forever chemicals. And there's research showing that those individuals currently diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which also, if you go to PubMed, you type in type 3 diabetes, you'll see that type 3 diabetes actually comes up as Alzheimer's disease. So we caramelize our cells with elevated A1Cs, but they found 3.8 times higher levels of DDE, the metabolite of DDT, which was banned in 1972. We stored in our fat. So now we're losing all this weight. We're losing xenoestrogens, our natural estrogens, our natural hormones, and all these chemicals. So if we're not actually working on detoxification simultaneously with weight loss, of course, we all know we're doing a great disservice for our patients. So our journey today, we'll talk about bariatrics and GLP-1s. We'll discuss Fortetropin, raw fertilized egg patented product. We'll talk about a little bit about anabolic resistance. We'll talk about skeletal muscle as a hormonal aspect of our well-being. So what happens if I lose a whole lot of weight? That might be a good thing. I'm happy because the scale said so. But couldn't I become a skinny fat? And we've all seen people that like, well, yeah, I just feel weak, but the scale's happy. So, and we're so driven by outward numbers and metrics. We want to be lean muscle-wise as well as lean in terms of the scale. And so the research has shown that by increasing our muscle mass, we can prevent the sabotage or the yo-yo with, of course, losing weight, but not losing it via muscle. So rapid weight loss, research is very clear, shows that we actually end up losing more muscle disproportionately. So muscles are involved with weight loss in several ways: burning calories while at rest, while we're sleeping, more muscle, that's a good thing, and higher basal metabolic rate, once again, back to the thyroid, and insulin sensitivity. All the reasons why we want to actually lose weight other than aesthetics. And once again, you have to have the muscle to do that. So all of my patients losing active amounts of weight, whether it be GLP-1, some of my patients have opted for bariatric surgery. I'm only the coach. I don't make decisions for my patients. That's where they have their autonomy. And it's like, wow, I mean, my wife and I got together with a couple that both did bariatric surgery, and they're thin people now, but boy, they don't look well. They look gaunt in the face, and you can just see their skin hanging off their bones. So we want to go on to a diet. And the problem with the GLP-1s is it curbs appetite. Well, that's a great thing, Crispy and me. Well, yeah, but most of us are overfed and undernourished to start with the westernized diet. And so as a result, now I'm eating less of the crummy foods, the dead foods I have a saying, dead food for dying people, live food for living people. And so a lot of these processed packaging, well, I'm just eating less of them, I'm eating less fast food, but you're also having less absorption of nutrients, which lead to micro and macronutrient issues. And so an endocrinologist in New York City said sarcopenia affects the elderly population, typically associated with aging. However, rapidly losing weight with GLP-1 drugs without a proper diet, and like the incorporation of Fortetropin, will cause sarcopenia. And this, of course, lowers the stamina, performance, walking upstairs, and this ends up with a problem. So less calories, less protein, less nutrients, and we end up malnourished. We're literally actively starving ourselves. And if you look at the word up in the far right, diet has the word die in it. The whole key is there not to die dieting. And if you mobilize a whole lot of toxins, which sadly enough my younger sibling did, she was scared of a basal cell carcinoma. She went on a hardcore vegan malnourished diet, not a healthy vegan diet, just started eating only vegetables because she's afraid of her basal cell, which was right by her nose. She lost about 35, 40 pounds in 2 months. And she was already menopausal. And then she started having 2 periods per month, starting January of 2023. In February of 2023, she was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of inflammatory breast cancer. And I have to wonder, coincidental or not, from no periods for a long period of time to 2 periods per month. And once again, weight loss, but let's not die dieting. And so when we go ahead and walk, we are, of course, weight-bearing exercise. We tell our patients to do that all the time. And lots of times we'll tell them, especially my thinner patients, well, why don't you wear a weight vest? Because if they're frail or light to start with, then we want them to bear more weight. But now all of a sudden you lose a whole lot of weight. So you look at this fun little group of people walking along. Well, some are bearing more weight, and all things being equal, those that bear more weight will generally have stronger bones, less osteoporosis, and they're doing, of course, more work. So what we want to do is make sure that when we're losing weight and we do it successfully, we have the muscle, which of course weighs more than fat per cubic millimeter or inch. So we want to decrease that frailty, and we want to improve that quality of life simultaneously, opposed to just sitting around taking a drug or having a surgery, losing weight. But once again, muscle mass is paramount, and we all know that. And you can see lots of references on the bottom of these slides. This is from Gerontology 2024, showing that sarcopenia and Alzheimer's both have a neuroinflammatory metabolic component, and the muscle actually protects the brain. We all know about the gut-brain connection. Well, what about the muscle-brain connection? So once again, they've shown that if you're going to give a big presentation, you need creativity. Literally tell somebody, go take a hike, aka a walk, but if you have humor, say, go take a hike. It'll help you with your concentration, your focus. It will. So once again, not only circulation, but it controls cytokines, inflammatory markers, and absorption. And when we're looking here, we're not looking at just myostatin. Remember, myostatin increases with age. So Fortetropin has been shown in clinical trials, and we'll go over those, that lowers myostatin to a healthier level. So once again, you want to have a little bit of myostatin, otherwise we'd be all muscle bound and couldn't button our shirts or our clinical jackets. Too much myostatin, bad. Too little myostatin, also bad. But reducing myostatin increases irisin that promotes beneficial metabolic effects, as you can see on this graphic. But myostatin inhibition helps with muscle growth. So all of a sudden, and there's actually a really cool study, the Berkeley study, which was 21 older individuals that did nothing with their diet and lifestyle, only took Fortetropin, and that an 18% increase in protein synthesis, which I'll get to that slide in a moment. So deletion of myostatin in mice led to the secretion of irisin and the browning of fat. So once again, manipulation of our little fur animals. So when we're looking here at targeting the tissues, and I have up here the funny little title, trigger alert, you say, for those that love biochemical pathways, You say, oh, this isn't very much, Chris. This isn't much of a biochemical pathway. But wait, we see sarcopenic obesity. So once again, you can be proper on the scale and have an okay BMI, but be mostly fat and very little lean body mass, but you've hit the number on the scale. But wait, trigger alert starts here with what's really happening with obesity and sarcopenia and the aging process and the tying in. As we get older, we enter andropause, male menopause, or menopause. We become the equivalent, unless we treat ourselves at the adrenal levels and our exogenous hormones, we become 10-year-old little boys and girls again. We don't have that prepubescent, and we don't have that post-puberty hormone level. So we're having to finagle things a little bit more. So once again, this is where Fortetropin helps with that anabolic support, because it helps with anabolic resistance. It's not an anabolic hormone. It is a raw fertilized egg product, whereas products on the shelf that you will cook an omelet with are not fertilized. These are fertilized eggs. But you can see the chemistry here that's going on. And I'm always just astounded on how we're made. And like, wow, all these pathways and umpteen more, as we can only imagine. So what we need to do is we need to have food as our best medicine. And this is where Fortetropin supplements a good diet and lifestyle. So the MYOS, once again, all natural bioactive compound derived from raw fertile eggs. Once again, the eggs which we cook with are not fertile and fertilized. And it's been shown to increase muscle growth, enhance muscle protein synthesis, and lower circulating myostatin. Remember, aging, sedentary lifestyle, injury, increase myostatin. We want to lower it naturally, and you can do it with this product. And so when you look here at myostatin, it's an important therapeutic target because it is involved in both diabetes and obesity. And various clinical trials have looked at improving muscle homeostasis and metabolic syndrome. Once again, you can see lots of references. And myostatin works as a negative regulator of muscle growth. So the higher the myostatin, the harder it is to have muscle growth. So let's say you have an athlete and she or he wants to go ahead and have better performance. And they're really working hard, but they've hit a plateau. And that happened with a chiropractor's wife of mine and patient. And, he's my chiropractor, but, once again, he knows me, I know. So his wife wanted to do ultra marathons, and also become a triathlete. Prior to that, she was a competitive gun shooter. And prior to that, she was racing race cars. So whatever she did it all in. But she could not qualify for it was either the Boston or the New York Marathon because her personal best for her age wasn't adequate. So we dialed in the muscle, we dialed in the mitochondria, and she not only qualified, she bettered her best personal time by 5 minutes. So it's remarkable. So once again, individual results will vary. But we want to help with insulin sensitivity. We want to reduce obesity, but we don't want to lose our muscle at the same time. So the research on Fortetropin is very clear. Lots of research has been done, and I'll go over some of these. These are also all available on the MYOS MD website. And you can see that, like, wow, very interesting. Once again, disuse syndrome. And this was actually a dog study. The other ones were human studies. The dog study, they actually have, and I'll show you the slides on it. They basically did the equivalent of a dog knee replacement. They planed it, fixed it. But now the dog, just like we would be, isn't able to move around. And the ones that were not on Fortetropin started having atrophy of their muscles. Those that were on Fortetropin didn't have the shrinkage of the muscles. So it was easier for them to get back into the groove of things of walking as quadrupeds. So myostatin reduces protein synthesis. And so once again, myostatin does that. So what do we want to do? We want to lower the myostatin. So we want to improve protein synthesis. And what happens just literally just sitting here this year, next year, the year after, doing nothing, it's going to rise. It's just a fact. And we want to break that dysfunction. And they found that the highest levels of myostatin are associated with physically frail older women. Could be also men, but this was a study. And the key was to lower the myostatin levels. So myostatin inhibition, per the journal, researchers said myostatin inhibition provides a promising means to attenuate or reverse skeletal muscle loss in the context of sarcopenia, as well as cachexia diseases associated with muscle loss. And I'm actually using it right now with a 13-year-old boy with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And he gained 13 pounds in 2 months while taking Fortetropin. Once again, individual results will vary, but he was underweight. He was at 100 pounds because he doesn't have that muscle density, and he was already wheelchair bound. And so it's like, wow, this once again has an application. A person that's been injured, a person that's on a weight loss program, and a person that just wants to get more out of their workouts. And I just put a 41-year-old on the product because he works out a lot. He has a personal trainer that he pays dearly for, but he just wasn't getting the improvement he wanted to see. So let's look at the Fortetropin studies. In a human study of 37 resistance-trained college males, lean body mass significantly increased in patients given Fortetropin compared to a placebo. That's compelling. Once again, a study. And they were either given 6.6 grams, which is half a scoop of Fortetropin, or a scoop and a half, 19.8 grams. And the larger amount of Fortetropin, the greater the improvement. But all of them experienced increase in lean body mass. And these were already trained college athletes. So once again, both had improvements, and Fortetropin decreased the markers of protein breakdown. Once again, you want to have increased protein synthesis, but you also don't want to lose what you just gained. And on a side note, I have a patient which is an overt kidney failure. His creatinine levels are very, very high. His GFR is below 15. So he's on, he's gotten into the final stage of kidney failure. He has a polycystic kidney disease, an autosomal dominant condition. His father passed from him. His younger brother already has a kidney replacement. But there's a cat study on chronic kidney disease. And as you know, cats are very common to get kidney problems. They actually did the cat study, once again, not a human study, and they actually showed that it actually allowed for maintaining of muscle mass while at the same time not damaging the kidneys and causing loss of kidney function. So as we sit as clinicians and we're thinking clinicians, we're functional medicine providers, like, wow, that is kind of interesting. So many applications, dogs, cats, humans, maybe if you have a hamster, who knows? But the study that really captures my attention because it fits my age category is the Berkeley study. And as you can imagine, the Berkeley study involved a Berkeley professor. 21 days of Fortetropin supplementation on protein synthesis, and they looked at older adults. They did not change their diet. They did not change their exercise, but they actually experienced an 18% higher level of protein synthesis than the placebo. And all they did was took a scoop of it every day. Randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind study. Compelling. And so the study indicated the potential for managing age-related muscle loss. So could every one of our seniors, unless they're just Adonises or the equivalent female of that, be using Fortetropin to just support a healthy aging process? Yes. My senior patients over the last 33 years of clinical practice, as we've gotten older, and I've gotten older with them, they don't go outside as much during the rainy season here in Oregon. They're afraid of slips and falls. And so they're stuck in that fear side of things. This can give them the ability to be a little stronger as they amble along. And I think of a gentleman that just broke his femur. He didn't break his hip, he broke his femur on slipping on a slippery spot in his driveway. And we've been actually giving him Fortetropin to help regain. He went to the hospital. He was put back together, much like Humpty Dumpty. But then he went to a nursing care facility. But the remarkable thing is this gentleman, a former professor of physics here in Oregon, actually was doing 10,000 steps a day prior to the injury. But then all of a sudden, he lost his momentum. And he was intentionally in his house, a 2-story house, doing 50 flights of stairs. A very methodical, analytical scientist. I'm doing my 50 flights of stairs every day prior to the injury, 10,000 steps. But we put him on Fortetropin because we want him to regain that level of momentum. So stimulating muscle protein synthesis in elderly can help with muscle mass and better outcomes from sarcopenia and, of course, injuries. So the dog study, they basically did the equivalent of a knee replacement for dogs. And the dogs that did not have the Fortetropin had muscle loss. The dogs that were given the Fortetropin did not have a reduction in the thigh circumference over the 8-week period of time as they were in the disuse syndrome. Once again, my rotator cuff, someone breaks it, injures, walk around a walker boot, whatever it might be. Like, wow, it has an application there as well. And so the strategies is we want to decrease the myostatin associated with immobility and the aging process and injury. And it ties in beautifully with exercise resistance training. It helps with things. And what's interesting with anabolic resistance, which is once again, the amino acids now being used at the muscle level so well, is amino acid leucine, along with the other essential amino acids and branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, are very important. But leucine particularly rises up as one of the great additions to using something like Fortetropin, so a supplementation routine. So we see the young active person, the aged person that might be getting a little bit soft around the middle or the arms or whatnot. And we're seeing the hormonal changes that occur with that. But then we're also seeing the myostatin levels also rising. And that's what the target here is for using Fortetropin, is to help lower the myostatin levels to a healthier level. Sarcopenia and diminished mitochondrial function. This is compelling. Once again, remember mitochondria. We have a lot of mitochondria in our brain. They say we have some 100,000 miles of blood vessels above our collarbone and another 60,000 miles of blood vessels below our collarbone. But we know that our brain needs 20% of our oxygen. It needs 20% of our glucose, and it has a whole heck of a lot of mitochondria to run that supercomputer, which we call our mind. And so what happens with the aging process and sarcopenia, lower mitochondrial density, and impaired biogenesis, or what we call mitogenesis of the mitochondria. So once again, supporting that healthier muscle. This is the product. It is, obviously, if a patient has an egg allergy or egg sensitivity or intolerance, not a product for them. But all it is, when I say all it is, all that's in the product is fertilized raw egg, which over 6 patents, showing that it actually helped lower the circulating myostatin levels and increase the fractional rate of muscle protein synthesis in men and women 60 to 75. And it's just a nice little powder. And my wife doesn't like yogurt. Once again, vegetarian, vegan, but she actually found putting in seltzer water was her way of doing it. So she has like a little LaCroix or something similar. She just puts a little bit in that and down it goes. She said, that's pretty easy, which is a remarkable success story in and of itself, because she will not eat eggs. So from a texture perspective. So what is Fortetropin? Once again, a revolutionary ingredient developed by top scientists and researchers at some of the finest institutions, including Berkeley. I guess they have 8 patents and 6 successful clinical trials. I said 6 patents earlier, I stand corrected. And it's just remarkable. It increases the things we want to increase. And Dr. Evans has gone around the world now lecturing on the impact of Fortetropin and also the damage that we have happened to us and humanity with sarcopenia. And here's anabolic resistance. And you'll say, well, Chris, I thought we were talking about aging and higher anabolic resistance. Yes, the study actually was for individuals like my patient, the 80-year-old, which was injured, people that were already active and staying active. If you're aging and you're on, like I said, the obese category, like the poor kidney failure case that I'm working with, then of course that anabolic resistance will be higher. And once again, that's when we're not able to use amino acids to support protein synthesis within the body. And we also, of course, have another aspect of anabolicness. And that anabolicness is when we have decreased testosterone, decreased insulin sensitivity, higher cortisol, which is, of course, catabolic, decreased DHEA levels, decreased estrogen levels, we're going to have problems with our muscles. So this is helping with the myostatin. And of course, we have to always address the other aspects of what is contributing to a person's lack of athletic or muscle performance. And anabolic resistance from a 2018 current opinion in critical care and chronic illness leads to anabolic resistance. Aging does, changes the microvasculature does, insulin resistance, welcome to metabolic syndrome, and of course, diabetes. And we wanted to offset that. And so skeletal muscle insensitivity is a reality, and one of the studies shows that the Fortetropin from MYOS MD actually helps improve anabolic sensitivity at the muscle layer. And then once again, that's like, for example, the Berkeley study with 18% increase in protein synthesis, no change in diet, other than, of course, taking the supplement for Fortetropin, and no change in exercise during that period of time. Our muscles are hormone creation. They're endocrine organ. We never thought of that. I can tell you, I never thought of it until about 2 or 3 years ago. It's like, wow. So our muscles are actually doing so much more. They're not just ambling us along like Thomas S. said, the prime function of the body is to carry around the mind. No, they're actually creating an environment, an ecology for us to thrive. And you can see all the hormonal aspects. So not only is it about being lean and looking good and not becoming frail and fragile, it's about sustaining the totality of the human body. And that's why we have 2 legs. And they did a study in 1953, and they looked at the conductors on London trolleys. And Hippocrates, way before that, said, hey, I got a theory. The humors, we know about it. All disease begins in the gut. We know that food is our best medicine. Once again, Hippocrates, 400 BC. But here we have the balance of the humors. And he advocated that young, old alike need to exercise, but not too much, not too little. Once again, Goldilocks. You'll see here Lance in 1953, 2 references. And they looked at drivers, so they're sitting all day long, and conductors. Drivers were more likely to have coronary artery disease than conductors. A body in motion stays in motion. Fast track to 2024, 2025 coming up here. And we wonder what's happening because we're sedentary. And once again, no moss grows on a rolling stone, but many of us are not rolling along very well, and we're sedentary. And we talk about cold plunges. I thought this was a very fun picture, an extreme example of cold plunge. I hope there's no underlying current there, so they don't, basically swim away or drift away. But what happens when we do a cold plunge? We're asking the mitochondria in our skeletal muscles to cause thermogenesis, some non-thermogenic aspects of, once again, mitochondrial function to help with lean body mass and activity. And you can see from a scientific perspective what's happening with electron transport chain when we stimulate the mitochondria at the ATP level. And then we're seeing muscles and the change on the brain. Once again, gerontology 2024. So let's say you have a patient and they haven't gotten an injury. They're not losing weight with intention with GLP-1 or bariatric surgery, and yet they're wanting to maintain their brain function. They need to stay active, and they need to support that lean body mass to create all of these hormones and biochemical factors, including the irisin, which we've seen, once again, very important. And as we wrap up and open up for questions in a moment here, once again, think of myokines and exerkines. Exerkines are a kind of myokine, and exerkines think exercise. That's why I like that term. But we have skeletal muscle, myokines. We have cardiokines. We have adipose tissues called adipokines. And we have brown adipose tissue called cytokines. Think cytokine storm. There's good cytokines and bad or deleterious cytokines. So we want to find that little level. So cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, all in things that, once again, healthier muscle. And my approach is pretty simple. I like to support the human body with the basics of nature. So whether it be a naturopathic philosophy of vis medicatrix naturae, or a more deeper philosophical concept based on faith, the concept is we need to take care of our body. So we want to see certain things happen. Why do we lose muscle mass? Reduce nerve stimulation. So think spinal alignment, damage. Once again, think diabetes, certain drugs, andropause, menopause, elevated cortisol levels, thyroid dysfunction, growth hormone deficits or insufficiencies, elevated inflammation, the anabolic resistance, sedentary lifestyle, poor diet. Welcome to the westernized world. One of our biggest problems is we're fed foodstuffs and not really food. And if you can't grow it out of a box or a can, it's not alive. It's not full of the enzymes. So once again, live food for living people, dead food for dying people. And we want to support that biological age. So I have a 63-year-old patient, and she has severe osteoporosis and sarcopenia. She fell off a ladder, shattered her entire hip, thigh, pelvis, leg, and upper body from the fall. She already had osteoporosis. Now it's worse. She was laid up for a long period of time. So is she on MYOS MD, Fortetropin? Yes, she is. I have a 55-year-old, which has pre and post-surgical issues. He's very healthy. He has 5 young boys. His BMI is perfect, but he tore up the knee playing with his teenage sons and thinking he was that way because his body generally was in agreement. So we pre and post-surgically have him on MYOS MD, Fortetropin. The 86-year-old was a gentleman with 10,000 steps at 50 flights of stairs. Always points that out. And his wife's adorable. She's a chemist, similar age category. And she says, yeah, I use my Fitbit, but I have to kind of bend down and swing it once I climb a hill so I get my count on my steps and my elevation. Once again, lovely couple that are staying in good shape, but injury does slow us down. And we're actually incorporating that for him because once again, he lost some momentum. 35-year-old, yo-yo dieting. This is a healthcare provider. He lost 40 pounds and he gained it all back. He also has sleep apnea, but he was on GLP-1 product. He lost the weight, but he lost his muscle mass. A very athletic guy, still plays basketball, but he lost it and then it just bounced all back. Once again, we have to address a sustainable diet. A diet is one that we sustain opposed to dieting, which is just, once again, for lack of a better word, extra petroleum on the barbecue. It's like just flames up. We want sustainable diets. 13-year-old, I already shared the story, gained some 13, 14 pounds within just like 6 to 8 weeks by just using it. But he was using the MYOS MD Fortetropin 3 times a day because, you know, he's in dire straits. So we had him on a very stiff dose for a young gentleman. And so Fortetropin helps mitigate anabolic resistance. And it also helps with healthy mTOR levels within the skeletal muscle. Also, it's important to consume sufficient calories to prevent T3 to reverse T3. Ancestrally, if we went into starvation mode, we go into a hibernation mode. So we're not eating, we have inflammation, we don't have enough iron, zinc, or selenium. We're going to have our T4 preference go down to reverse T3 opposed to T3. We're not going to get that conversion. We're not going to be supporting the mitochondria. And we're going to go into conservation mode. And when you're trying to lose weight or optimize your lean body mass, conservation mode is not where we want to go. So you have to consume enough calories and enough micro and macronutrients within those calories. You have to have sufficient protein and essential amino acids, including leucine. And we have to support the mitochondria with nicotinamide riboside, CoQ10, pyroquinone, resveratrol. We have to fuel that citric acid cycle, Krebs cycle is also known as, or TCA cycle, and also our electron transport chain. And also we need to have our steps, body in motion, and resistance training. But we have to also detoxify when our patients are losing weight with intention or not, that they don't die dieting. I know it sounds very dramatic, but sadly enough, I've seen it more than once. And I have a little simple handout I give my patients of phase 1, phase 2, and the ever important phase 3, which is, of course, stool, urine, and you could argue also sweating. And we have to ensure good sleep and rule out sleep apnea. And of course, testing, very important. Dysregulation of cortisol levels, which are catabolic, ensuring that we have our testosterone levels, male and female, DHEA levels, particularly DHEA sulfate, our full panel of thyroid, ensuring the growth hormone levels are important. And if you're not doing growth hormone levels in your practice, you know it comes with a Z-score. And much like with osteoporosis, it's going to say, where are you compared to the age-adjusted norm for your age and your gender? But that's a slippery slope because where's the reference ranges and who are you being compared to? Fast food eaters? What average westernized person? Yes. So once again, looking at those reference ranges, as we all know as functional medicine providers, so vitally important to make them a little tighter that we just don't accept mediocrity, but actually go much deeper into wellness. So I'm going to open up for questions. I'm sorry I'm long-winded. And one of my other disclaimers I should have said was I speak a little quickly sometimes.
I think you spoke just perfectly. So thank you. That was extremely informative. We actually have some questions that we took prior to the webinar that people were asking. So I'm going to ask the list that I have. Is there a particular dosage for kids?
For children, I usually start at 6.6. Now, in the case of the 13-year-old with Duchenne's, I actually had him on 13.2 3 times a day. I had him on a very stiff dose. But usually children will respond very quickly with a lower dose, but once again, whatever their healthcare provider recommends. But I usually start with the lower dose. And the vanilla actually is a nice size for kids to start with. It has a little bit of flavor. And at the lower dose, 6.6 works perfectly because it's a smaller canister and the flavor and the size is perfect for, you know, kiddos and people that are not of extreme weight.
Yeah, it's because there's a lot of, you know, what I see with kids is growth issues, And, I also have a 6-year-old with Duchenne's. So,
Oh, I had
yeah,
no
and
idea.
I have recently suggested this product to the dad. So he's researching it, as with all things. When I always tell them, you do your thing. Let me know when you order. So best products to pair with this formula, what would you suggest?
I think essential amino acids, and anything that supports our natural resilience of our mitochondria, our thyroid, our adrenals. If you think about myself, 30 years past my peak of 60 kilograms per day of ATP production, you want to support the mitochondria. You want to support quality of sleep. But I think part of it is our assimilation. My 18th book was called The Microbial Mucosal Milieu Theory, and that we have a microbiome in the entirety of our body. And they argue even the brain, but our blood, uterus, prostate, bladder, you name it. And so that we have this neural network, much like an ancient forest, where it's all talking to one another. And our small microbiota community is speaking, but taking care of our gut is important because we have to assimilate. And so many people are taking PPIs and acid blockers. And just because you find in a big box store, it no longer is it under patent, so now they're throwing it to the masses. People are just not assimilating it well. So focusing really on good digestion, but the essential amino acids, of course, branched chain amino acids. And I would argue glutamine. I'm a huge fan of glutamine with some rare exceptions because glutamine is a conditional amino acid. It's necessary for the immune function. It's necessary for gut integrity, and it's essential for, once again, muscle health.
Awesome. Do you use any testing? I know you went over some markers for thyroid and hormones, but do you use any myostatin testing or follistatin testing to measure success with this?
Actually, I usually measure it on lean body mass and success.
Mm.
Could you? Yeah, if you're super analytical and the patient's insurance is good and doesn't consider that
Right.
investigational, life is great. But here in Oregon, where we get very little sun, I mean, I enjoyed my 3.5, 4 months of sun here in Oregon, grew my sunflowers, but they consider vitamin D in Oregon an investigational test, unless we go into even more obtuse testing, like vitamin D investigational, like what? Yeah, so
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, and at the core, this is an incredible alternative to myostatin inhibitors that we're seeing on the market that have so many side effects. So, are there dosage differences for specific conditions from just somebody who wants to gain more lean muscle mass for strength, versus recovering from surgery versus chronic disease engines, things like Duchenne's, or do you have a dosage difference for those?
yeah. Speaking to the clinicians on the call, I would say that I will, if a person's in more dire straits or they've been caught more flat-footed and they're not in good shape to start with, and they have an injury, then I'm going to, of course, increase the dosage because we're playing some catch up. And I look
Mm,
at everything very simply as a health savings account. How much health savings did they have? How much reserve do they have? And sometimes we have to pay back a lot of previous debt of sedentary or obesity or hormonal
mhm.
imbalances that just were never addressed until they come walking through our doors in the clinic. And then we're playing catch up. And then I would do I'd like double up the dose for a while. Of course, assuming no egg allergy and making sure they have, good kidney function and they're drinking their water and doing other smart things.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible knowledge. If everyone can take a look at the last slide, there's a contact information for Greg Arabastis. He helps MYOS get the name and the brand out there. As you can see how crucial this is for a time such as this. Email and phone number, but we have a special offer for you tonight. If you scan the QR code, that is going to get you registered for a wholesale account. So you can sign up with MYOS. And if you use the code GetHealthy10, you will get 10% off your first purchase of 6 containers, which you can choose between vanilla or the unflavored. I have both of them here. As Dr. Meletis was saying, the vanilla is a great tasting product. You could start out with something that's a smaller size. You can test it on, people that are in your clinic and just give it a spin even for yourself. I know that I've started putting a little bit in my son's protein shakes and my own. Doesn't change the flavor. It actually really helps. And my son, as we were talking earlier, Dr. Meletis, that he's 15, he's 5'11", but he's trying to bulk up. So we're getting up there. He's about 167 now, and we keep packing on the muscle. So I'm going to keep a record of how well this actually helps him gain that lean muscle mass. And thank you again for taking the time to be here. And practitioners, do not forget to add this to your Get Healthy store. We have it available in our catalog. It is waiting for you to be able to script and recommend to your patients and clients, and you will not be sorry. It's an incredible product. So thank you, Dr. Meletis, and thank you to MYOS for allowing you to do this great webinar.
Well, thank you, Doc. Thank you for having me, and the very best to everybody.
All right. We'll see you guys at our next webinar.